that I do need to make. Number one, well, we're going to start out with something easy. We're going to have a drawing. I told you in the beginning, Judge Chapman believes in drawings. We're going to have a drawing. Our organization has traditionally had drawings. We have 2 prizes, and you all have a ticket, which should be in the back of your name badge. Did everybody get a ticket? We don't want anybody left out of this. This is a big, because we have 2 prizes.
What did I win?
Well, we're going to find out, Judge. You're a little anxious. I was going to have you draw, but now I don't trust you. So I need, well, here we have Yolanda here to draw for us. All right, is everybody ready and rapt attention? Okay, here we go. Now, Yolanda, stir him up a little. I don't want it to be thought that I tried to help Judge Flores in any way. Whoops. She bought one. We have to put that one back in first before I even look. We do this all in the open, okay? I'm going to look at the number. Here we are, number 26, 1303. Who got it? Well, come on up. You get a... She is the winner of a book by Judge Duryea called Hooked on Drugs. Is that what it is? Yeah. I was close. All right, so we have one winner now of the grand prize, which is really big. Really big. There's a lot of thought went into this prize. Okay, mix them up and draw. See if Judge Flores gets lucky for once. I doubt it. Okay, here we are. The winner is 1319. You got it? No?
That's the wrong number.
Nobody's got it? Back. We're getting rid of these. Okay, here's the next. We're trying this again. These people who leave early are going to be sorry. Probably the judges. All right. 1, 3, 2, 4.
What is it?
1, 3, 2, 4. Oh! Somebody local. Now, the grand prize, although it's a bit marked up, is a gift certificate to Lowe's and a bumper sticker.
Oh, thank you so much.
There you go. Let's give Lisa. She's been very, very helpful. And there you are, a winner. All right, so a couple of housekeeping things. Number one, please don't forget to turn in your evaluations. You will get a prize. Everybody's a winner. You don't have to have a ticket. You will get a prize for turning it in to give you a little energy to get home. We are the only program I think that's ever given a prize for turning in an evaluation. Next, something important. I do want to make an announcement in behalf of not only our organization, but more importantly, the AOC and the Judicial Council. We have a wonderful conference called Beyond the Bench, which is not just for judges, it's for everyone. It will be held December 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, as I recall, and it will be held in Los Angeles, in Anaheim, where we're going to have our national conference next year. And I want to encourage you all to go to it. There will be presentations on veterans courts, on, if you were not able to hear the presentation, on drug court standards by Dr. Marlowe at our national conference. That will be presented, which is a very helpful document and findings, research findings. There will be also presentations on family, juvenile. If you're interested in parolees, and I can't believe there is anyone in the room other than me, but if you are interested in working with PRCS, parolees, reentry courts, there'll be a presentation on that, and almost anything you can think of. And this is, I believe, the best conference that the Judicial Council and the courts sponsor all year long, because it's open to everyone. And there are far more non-judges attend than judges. But the good thing about it is we do get a lot of judges, and so the opportunity to get judges to think differently is incredibly strong at this one conference. So please think about it, and if you can go, go. Now, next, those of you who signed up for CEUs, this is complicated. You have to sign when you leave, but we need your email address. The incredibly well thought out form that you signed when you came in had no room for your email address. So you have to turn it over and put your email address on the back. The reason you need to do that is because if you don't, you won't get any credit, you'll get mad, and I'll get a letter. So please do that for us. Now, we have covered everything I believe that we need to for winding things down before I ask Dr. Callahan to finish up. But I just want to take this moment because we're going to end, and that's it, because you all need to get home, catch planes, and everything else. But I want to thank you all for attending, and I hope you got something out of this conference. I hope you'll think about joining our organization, because this is what we live for, is putting on conferences like this and bringing up subjects that usually are not addressed in any detail at any conference. So with that said, at this time I want to introduce once again Dr. Callahan.
Okay, I think what the plan is to have each of the groups report out what the major points were or some major topics and issues that you discussed during your period. The intention was that Judge Manley and I and others would get to go to all of them. We didn't get to go to all of them. So if we want to start with what was the first? The veterans, I think, were the first on the list. If you could just summarize what you talked about and what you think some of the major issues are. Microphone.
I am the Veteran Secretary. I was coerced into accepting the job, but
That's okay.
okay, hold on. Sure, I love. Here, I don't want feedback, so. Okay, so veterans, we talked about how we can kind of use the information discussed earlier today. Of course, veterans, there's a lot of possibility for trauma and stuff of that nature, just going to war, being in the military. And we talked some about the difficulty with combat and exposure to violence and, war stuff, but also how difficult it was to transition from civilian life to, soldier, Marine life, and back again. We talked about, I don't know, what else did we talk about, guys? We talked about, we did. We talked about that. We also talked about, did you all hear that? Changing the face of VA services. We talked about treatment kind of stuff. We talked about, changing the language. That was a big thing. Talked behavioral health versus mental health. There's stigma to using the word mental health. There's stigma to using the word disorder. So talking about, I heard one of our leaders talk about PTS instead of PTSD. I noticed that. Post-traumatic stress versus post-traumatic stress disorder. And somebody used the word being culturally responsive. And I think that just the language, talking about language, is a bit of being culturally responsive. I took notes and notes and notes and notes. There's a lot of difficulty connecting with the younger vets. We talked about strategies for connecting with younger vets. A lot of them don't want to go in and join with some of the Vietnam era guys and the older guys and doing those kind of stuff. They want to do sort of normal 24-year-old stuff, whatever that is. We all know what that is. We talked about outreach, ways of connecting. One of our group leaders talked about how she goes and does booths and stuff, goes to community colleges and fire stations and churches and anyone who will let her talk and talk about services and stuff like that. A lot of the problems that are being seen by we had a judge on our team. He talked about domestic violence and how there's like this resistance to having people who have been charged with on domestic violence cases, felony DV charges. I don't know all the right language because I'm a therapist. I'm not a legal person. How there's a resistance to letting them be part of the treatment courts, but that this is a group that could really benefit from the services, stuff like that. One more thing. I got one more thing in that head of mine. And that one more thing is there's a lot of traffic-related stuff. We talked about traffic, especially with the guys, men, women driving cars and trucks and Humvees, and that was my pencil. Over there that you see a lot of people doing things like driving 100 miles an hour in 25-mile-an-hour zone and getting a lot really anxious and, for lack of a better word, like tripping as they're driving, and that's resulting in a lot of charges. And as your secretary, that's what I got.
Did anyone want to ask them questions about what they discussed in the excellent job that the secretary reported out?
Well, I've got a question on how do you get to change the services? How do you get the feds or others to change the conversation about what veterans treatment services could be, how they could, maybe come up to the times and address some of the trauma issues and other things, and maybe even more importantly, this idea of not letting in what we call violent charges or domestic violence charges when it's so prevalent, especially for veterans, because I know they're a hot topic right now and they're in a hot funding seat. They're giving out a lot of grants for this stuff, but how do you get that message to the feds to release that, restriction?
Judge?
I think I can answer that for you. There is a bill pending in Congress, which is a bipartisan bill, to fund veterans treatment courts using MIOCRA money. And that bill specifically eliminates all the language that cut out felons, violence, and so forth from receiving funding for drug courts. So there is a pending bill. Of course, Congress isn't exactly doing anything at the moment, but once the government gets rolling again, and that bill is very popular with both Republicans and Democrats and the Tea Party representatives. So that would open up and answer your concern.
Also on that, as partial response to that, SAMHSA's grants don't always restrict by eligibility criteria by offense, especially if they come through, if they have any CMHS funding versus the CSAT funding. There are not restrictions that eliminate violent offenses. That actually came up in one of our grant programs because the expectation was they couldn't have any violent offenses. For example, the Cleveland Mental Health Court is one of the largest mental health court dockets, felony mental health court dockets in the country, and their only exclusionary crime is a capital crime. So, and they're able to do that even with having SAMHSA funds for a variety of programs. So, there are some avenues that you can do that. And my understanding too is there's been some discussion on some of the other drug court, national level drug court funding, that they would not any longer restrict to only nonviolent offenses. Because you're right, there are certain groups of people, veterans among them, that there's a lot of domestic violence, a lot of partnership violence in those, and that's often what gets them to court, or the driving offenses. Partly they have to drive very offensively in Iraq and Afghanistan, and that offensive driving doesn't translate well back here. And the swerving to avoid IEDs and that type of behavior can often get them into court. Okay, the next group I think were the adult males were listed. You were an A and now you are B.
I was told if I took notes, I wouldn't have. Suckers. All right, we had quite a diverse group. The facilitator, treatment, probation. So it was a good group. We talked about issues unique to male population, which regarding trauma was losing power and control and safety, which was kind of contradictive to the typical male identity. They're more secretive, they minimize more, rationalized, especially when you talked about sexual abuse by women. We talked about self-judgment and how they thought maybe they weren't man enough to protect themselves. We talked about trauma and PTSD, how it kind of came about post-Vietnam. And when you talk about combat, you were talking more of male emphasis, but when you talked about rape, assault, or child abuse, it was much more of a female issue. We talked about the need for a support system to validate their feelings, and it was hard to find those for males due to their masculinity, their machismo. We had a group discussion about the trauma assessment and what they can and can't do. There was a book recommendation, Herman, 1992, Trauma and Recovery. We discussed kind of black and white thinking by men who have suffered abuse, and our facilitator talked about the fight or flight response, the frontal temporal lobes, the 0 to 5-year-old brain development. We talked about the minimization of jail violence and how on trauma questionnaires, when you added the jail, have you been kicked or hurt in jail or prison, how the numbers really increased. A little bit about jail interviews and how you have to be cognizant of time and space and what they go through when they come and talk to you in an interview and what happens when they leave. We had a bit of discussion on accountability and how it's not just punishment and that you should do so with compassion or respect. Some discussion about clients using traumatic experience to get what they want and to manipulate